Picture a world of elite warriors, where armies were armed with precious, rare bronze. Now, imagine a brand new metal, one that's abundant, brutally strong, and available to almost anyone. Well, that's the story of iron. This is about a technology that didn't just win battles, it was the tool that forged entire empires and completely reshaped the course of history.
Okay, so let's get right into it. The difference between these two metals, well, that's the whole story right there. Bronze, you see, was an elite material. To make it, you needed copper and tin, and getting those depended on really complex, fragile international supply chains. And in a fight, it could actually be pretty brittle. Iron, though, it was a common element. Production was simpler, and the final product was way stronger and far more durable. This wasn't just some small upgrade, it was a total disruption of the old world order.
So, to really get a handle on just how huge iron's impact was, we first have to look at the world it was about to overturn, a sophisticated but incredibly fragile age of bronze.
Before iron came along, the great civilizations, we're talking about the Mycenaeans in Greece, the Hittites in modern-day Turkey, the New Kingdom of Egypt, they were all deeply interconnected. It was a surprisingly globalized system, all linked together by these intricate networks of diplomacy and trade. It was a golden age of sorts, but the whole thing was built on a knife's edge.
And this right here illustrates that point perfectly. What we're looking at is cargo from the Uluburun shipwreck, which is basically a time capsule from the late Bronze Age. On board, 10 tons of copper and 1 ton of tin, the exact 10-to-1 ratio you need to make bronze. This one ship was just a single piece of a massive international supply chain. It just goes to show you the incredible effort it took just to arm the armies of the day.
Then, around 1200 BCE, that entire system came crashing down. And it wasn't just one thing, it was a complete systems collapse. You had these waves of invasions from mysterious groups they called the Sea Peoples, you had a series of devastating earthquakes, and now we're finding new evidence of a crippling megadrought that led to widespread famine. The old world, with its delicate supply chains for bronze, was completely shattered.
But out of the ashes of this collapse, a revolutionary new technology started to emerge, one that was perfectly suited for a more chaotic and decentralized world.
The key invention was this thing called the bloomery. It was the earliest type of furnace for smelting iron. What's so fascinating about it is that it didn't even have to get hot enough to fully melt the iron. Instead, it produced this spongy, porous mass of iron and impurities called a bloom. This was just a much simpler, more accessible technology. So how did it actually work? Well, you'd fill a furnace with layers of charcoal and iron ore. Then you'd pump in air with bellows to get it burning really hot. The carbon monoxide from that fire would then strip the oxygen from the ore, leaving you with metallic iron. That spongy bloom was then pulled out and hammered again and again to force out all the impurities and create usable, strong wrought iron.
And this chart right here, this is why it was a revolution. Just look at the sheer abundance of iron in the Earth's crust. 50,000 parts per million. Now compare that to copper at 60 and tin at a tiny 2 parts per million. All of a sudden, the essential material for making weapons and tools was no longer some rare, expensive luxury. It was, quite literally, as common as dirt.
So this new, abundant metal didn't just change how tools were made. Its first and most dramatic consequence was that it completely rewrote the rules of war. To put it simply, iron weapons were just better. They were harder, they held a sharp edge for longer, and they wouldn't bend or break in combat as easily as bronze. An army with iron weapons had an immediate and decisive advantage over one that didn't.
This technological edge made entirely new ways of fighting possible. The old Bronze Age armies often relied on the phalanx, basically a rigid wall of spearmen. But once they were equipped with mass-produced iron swords and javelins, the Romans developed the flexible maniple formation. It was this checkerboard of small, independent units that could move around on rough terrain and adapt to the flow of a battle.
And the evolution didn't stop there. The maniple eventually gave way to the cohort system. Because iron weapons and armor could be so easily mass-produced, armies could finally be standardized. Each cohort was a self-sufficient military unit of identically equipped soldiers. This was the backbone of a truly professional fighting force.
And this standardization, it allowed for armies on a scale the world had never seen before. A single Roman legion was made up of about 5,500 soldiers. This wasn't some small band of aristocrats anymore. This was a massive, state-funded, ironclad military machine. And the Romans weren't the first to figure this out. The Assyrian Empire was one of the earliest to fully harness the power of iron, and it gave them a terrifying advantage. They used it to build one of the first and most brutal great empires of the Iron Age.
But the impact of iron went far beyond the battlefield. It fundamentally re-engineered the very structure of society itself.
Think about it. When weapons become cheap and abundant, warfare is no longer the exclusive domain of the rich elite. This is a massive shift in power. The small, bronze-wielding aristocracy lost their monopoly on violence, and that power started moving towards the masses. A regular citizen soldier with an iron spear could now challenge a nobleman, not just on the battlefield, but in the political arena too.
The Marian reforms in Rome are the perfect example of this social revolution. The state started providing arms and armor to all recruits. All of a sudden, you didn't need to own land to join the army, and you were even guaranteed a plot of conquered land when you retired. This created a professional, career-based army, drawn from the landless poor, whose loyalty was often to their victorious general, not to the state itself.
So what was the ultimate result of this military and social revolution? Well, this new kind of army, built on cheap iron and professional soldiers, was an engine of expansion. It allowed for the conquest and administration of vast territories, creating empires on a scale the Bronze Age could have never even dreamed of.
So, what is the ultimate legacy then of this powerful, disruptive, and world-changing metal?
In short, the widespread availability of iron didn't just create better swords, it created an entirely new world. It slammed the door shut on the Bronze Age and kicked open the door to a new era, defined by mass armies, centralized empires, and a pace of change that would reshape the very foundations of civilization.
Every era has a technology that fundamentally rewrites the rules of power, making old structures obsolete and creating brand new possibilities. And that leaves us with a pretty provocative question to think about. What is the iron of our time?